The moment Michael Jordan finally had enough. Nobody expected this. Not the Oklahoma City Thunder, not the media, not even the millions of NBA fans who have spent the last few years arguing about where Shai Gilgeous-Alexander belongs among basketball's biggest stars. Because for years, the conversation around Shai was simple. Elite scorer, MVP caliber talent, face of a rising franchise. Then everything changed. What started as a few frustrated comments from fans suddenly exploded into one of the biggest controversies the NBA has seen in years. And according to reports, whispers, and growing criticism around the league, one voice stood above all the noise. Michael Jordan, the greatest player to ever touch a basketball, rarely comments on modern NBA stars. He doesn't jump into social media debates. He doesn't spend his time criticizing active players. That's what made the situation so shocking. When Jordan's name became attached to criticism surrounding Shai's style of play, the basketball world immediately stopped and paid attention. Because this wasn't about a missed shot. It wasn't about a bad game. It wasn't even about losing. This was about something much bigger. The very definition of greatness. For decades, Jordan represented a standard that many believed could never be matched. Relentless competitiveness, physical toughness, the willingness to absorb punishment and still deliver when everything was on the line. So when conversations began comparing today's stars to legends from previous generations, fans naturally started asking uncomfortable questions. Has the game changed too much? Are modern stars being rewarded for things that previous generations never would have gotten away with? And is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander becoming the face of that debate? The numbers only fueled the controversy. Throughout another dominant season, Shai consistently found ways to get to the free throw line. Supporters called it skill. Critics called it manipulation. Supporters argued that drawing contact is part of basketball. Critics argued that hunting whistles was becoming more important than creating shots. The divide grew larger with every game. Then came the playoffs. Every possession felt more important. Every whistle became more controversial. Every replay sparked another debate online. Suddenly, social media was flooded with clips. Fans broke down possessions frame by frame. Former players joined television panels. Analysts started questioning whether the league had created an environment that rewarded foul hunting more than pure shot making. And right in the center of the storm stood Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, one of the most talented players in basketball, one of the most discussed players in basketball, and now one of the most controversial. But what nobody expected was how quickly the criticism would spread. What started as fan frustration soon turned into discussions involving former stars, media personalities, coaches, and even active players. The conversation was no longer about one game. It was no longer about one playoff series. It had become a referendum on the entire direction of modern NBA basketball. And as the debate intensified, more statistics emerged. More clips surfaced. More voices entered the conversation. What happened next transformed this from a basketball discussion into a full-scale NBA drama that dominated headlines for weeks. And trust me, the most explosive part of the story hadn't even happened yet. If you're watching right now, tell me where you're watching from in the comment. And here's a question for every basketball fan. Do you think drawing fouls is simply part of being a great scorer, or do you believe today's NBA rewards it too much? Comment 1 if you think it's a skill. Comment 2 if you think it's hurting the game. And don't forget to subscribe, because what happened next turned this controversy into something nobody saw coming. The numbers that changed the conversation. For a long time, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's supporters had a simple defense. They said he was too skilled, too crafty, too smooth. They argued that defenders could not stay in front of him, and when a player is that dangerous with the ball, contact is almost impossible to avoid. And honestly, there is truth in that. Shai is not some random player being pushed by height. His footwork is elite. His patience is elite. His ability to stop, rise, change speed, and punish defenders is one of the most impressive offensive packages in the league. But this is where the debate became dangerous, because at some point, fans stopped asking whether Shai was good. Everybody already knew he was good. The real question became whether his greatness was being inflated by a whistle that seemed to follow him everywhere. Every night, the same pattern appeared. A defender would slide with him. Shai would lean, the whistle would blow, another possession would end at the free throw line. For casual fans, it looked normal at first. Great scorers get fouled. That has always been part of basketball. But for people watching closely, something felt different. The free throws were not just helping his game. They were becoming the center of it. And once playoff basketball arrived, that difference became impossible to ignore. The postseason is supposed to reveal the truth. Defenses tighten. Coaches adjust. Refs usually allow more contact. Stars are forced to prove they can score when every easy option disappears. But with Shai, critics argued that the opposite was happening. Instead of the whistle fading, It seemed to become part of the story. Every box score created another debate. Every close game turned into another argument. And every free throw made fans wonder whether they were watching a superstar dominate or a system reward the smartest whistle hunter in the building. That is why the numbers hit so hard. Because numbers remove emotion, they force fans to look at the pattern, and once people saw how often Shai was getting to the line compared to everyone else, the criticism became louder than ever. This was no longer just old school fans complaining about modern basketball. This was a league-wide argument about fairness, entertainment, and identity. Supporters saw genius, critics saw theater, and stuck between both sides was a superstar whose reputation was suddenly being judged possession by possession. Why the Jordan comparison made everything explode? The reason this controversy became so emotional was not just because Shai was getting free throws, it was because people started comparing him to Michael Jordan, and that is where the entire conversation changed. Jordan's name is not just a name in basketball. It is a measuring stick. It represents a certain kind of pressure, a certain kind of fear, and a certain kind of competitive standard that fans still talk about decades later. When people think of Jordan, they think of mid-range daggers, impossible finishes, ruthless defense, and a player who seemed almost offended by the idea of losing. They think of someone who absorbed contact and kept coming. They think of someone who did not need a friendly whistle to define his legacy. So when Shai started rising into MVP conversations, and when the league began treating him like one of the faces of modern basketball, the comparison became unavoidable. But for critics, it felt wrong. They were not saying Shai lacked talent. They were saying the path looked different. Jordan's greatness felt like survival. Shai's critics argued that his greatness sometimes looked like negotiation. Jordan attacked defenders, Shai manipulated defenders. Jordan wanted the bucket first. Shai's critics believed he often wanted the whistle first. That contrast became the emotional engine of the entire drama. Old school fans felt like the sport they loved was being rewritten right in front of them. They watched a league that once celebrated physical toughness become a league where some possessions looked more like acting than attacking. And Shai became the symbol. Fair or unfair, he became the player people pointed to when they wanted to explain what frustrated them about the modern NBA. That is why Jordan's shadow made the situation feel bigger than one player. Because if the award, the conversations, and the praise were going to connect modern stars to legendary names, fans wanted the standard to feel the same. They wanted proof, not just numbers, not just free throws, not just highlight clips. They wanted the kind of playoff moment where nobody could question the source of the greatness. And until Shai delivered that kind of moment, every whistle became evidence for the people waiting to doubt him. When the media turned the heat up, at first, the criticism lived mostly online. Fans posted clips, comment sections exploded. Debate shows picked up little pieces of the story, but then the media machine fully locked in, and once that happened, there was no going back. Every major basketball show seemed to find a new angle. One panel asked whether foul baiting was ruining the product. Another asked whether Shai was being officiated differently from other stars. Another compared him to players from previous eras and questioned whether his game would translate in a more physical NBA. The conversation became impossible for Oklahoma City to control. That was the dangerous part, because when a young superstar is winning, teams can usually protect him with results. They can say the criticism is just jealousy. They can point to the standings, the scoring numbers, the awards, and the wins. But when the criticism is about how those numbers are created, the defense becomes much harder. Suddenly, every possession becomes part of the evidence. If Shai scores on a tough jumper, supporters say, "See, he is elite." If he gets 2 free throws, critics say, "There it is again." That is an impossible position for any player to live in. And the more people talked, the more intense the language became. Some analysts framed Shai as a brilliant technician who understood the rules better than everyone else. Others framed him as the face of a growing problem inside the league. Then former players started weighing in. That is when the story gained a sharper edge. Because fans may argue emotionally, but when people who actually played the game start questioning a star's style, it carries a different kind of weight. They know the tricks, they know the contact, they know the difference between earning a foul and selling one, and when those voices started suggesting that the NBA had gone too far in rewarding offensive players, the controversy stopped feeling like a simple hot take. It started feeling like a cultural shift. Shai was still winning games, still scoring points, still carrying himself with confidence, but the narrative around him had changed. And in the NBA, once the narrative turns, it can move faster than any defender on the court. The fans made it personal. The media may have lit the fire, but the fans poured gasoline on it. Because NBA fans do not just watch controversy anymore. They build it. They clip it. They meme it. They they remix it, they turn one moment into 1,000 jokes before the final buzzer even sounds. And once Shai became the center of the flopping debate, the internet moved with brutal speed. Every fall became a replay. Every whistle became a punchline. Every slow motion angle became another reason for fans to argue. Inside arenas, the reaction became even louder. Opposing crowds began treating every Shai possession like a courtroom trial. If he drove to the basket and hit the floor, the boos came instantly. If he looked at an official after contact, the noise got even worse. It was not just normal playoff hostility. It felt targeted. Fans wanted him to hear it. They wanted him to know that the reputation had followed him into the building. That is one of the hardest things for any superstar to deal with, because talent can silence a crowd for a night, but reputation follows you everywhere. And when an entire fan base decides that your game is built around fooling the officials, every movement gets judged differently. A normal fall looks suspicious. A normal reaction looks exaggerated. A normal whistle feels controversial. That is what happened to Shai. He was not just playing against defenders anymore. He was playing against a story, and the story was everywhere. On social media, fans created nicknames, edits, jokes, and comparison videos. Some were funny, some were harsh, some went too far. But all of them pointed to the same truth. The audience was no longer simply debating his skill. They were questioning his basketball identity. That is a much deeper wound, because a player can survive bad shooting nights. A player can survive losses, but when fans start laughing at the way you score, that becomes a different kind of pressure. And for Shai, the pressure was only beginning, because the next wave of criticism did not come from random fans online. It came from people standing right across from him on the court. Opponents smelled blood. In the NBA, players notice everything. They notice who complains. They notice who gets calls. They notice who gets protected, and they definitely notice when the public starts turning on a superstar. That is why the Shai controversy became even more dangerous when opponents started using it as a weapon. Defenders understood the situation. They knew every drive would be watched closely. They knew every whistle would be questioned. They knew that if they could make Shai uncomfortable, the crowd and the media would do the rest. That is how playoff pressure works. It is not just physical, it is psychological. Suddenly, every defender had a new strategy. Do not just contest the shot. Make him prove he can score without the whistle. Stay disciplined. Keep hands back. Force tough jumpers. Make the officials decide whether they really want to keep sending him to the line while the entire basketball world is watching. That kind of pressure can change a series, because when a player is used to controlling the rhythm through free throws, taking away that rhythm can make everything feel rushed. The game becomes faster. The reads become harder. The crowd gets louder. The confidence starts to shake, and then comes the real test. Can the superstar adjust? Can he punish defenders with pure shot making? Can he take the criticism, stay calm, and deliver anyway? That was the question hanging over Shai. Some opponents did not even need to say much. Their body language said enough. Every time they stepped away with their hands up after a whistle, the message was clear. Here we go again. Others were more direct, using interviews and post-game comments to point at the issue without always saying the loudest part out loud. That is the art of NBA drama. Players know how to send a message. They know how to plan a headline. And once those comments hit social media, the debate exploded again. For Shai, the court became a pressure chain. Every opponent wanted to expose him. Every fan wanted to react. Every analyst wanted to decide what it meant. And Oklahoma City suddenly had to protect not just its playoff run, but the image of its franchise player. When a joke became a business problem, then the controversy crossed a line nobody expected. It moved beyond talk show, beyond social media, beyond arena chants. The joke became a product. And when that happened, the drama entered a completely different world. A parody-style basketball game mocking, foul baiting spread across the internet and immediately caught fire. The concept was simple, but the message was loud. It turned the criticism of Shai's playing style into something fans could see, share, and laugh about. That is when the situation became bigger than basketball, because online jokes disappear quickly, but a physical product, a commercial, a campaign, or a brand, using your image as part of a national conversation, that feels permanent. That cuts deeper. For Shai's side, it was not just criticism anymore. It was reputation damage. It was a star player being turned into a symbol of everything people disliked about modern officiating. And that is when the response became serious. Legal pressure entered the picture. Requests were made to stop using his name and image, and once fans heard about that, the internet did what the internet always does. It made the story even bigger. Critics said the reaction proved the joke's headland. Supporters said every athlete has the right to protect their image. Both sides had arguments, but the damage had already been done, because now every discussion about Shai carried two layers. There was the basketball debate, and there was the image debate. Was he being unfairly targeted because he was successful? Or was he finally facing backlash for a style of play fans had grown tired of watching? That question split the basketball world. And honestly, that is what made the story so powerful. Because Shai was not just fighting defenders anymore, he was fighting perception, and perception is one of the hardest opponents in sport. Once people decide what they think you are, every new moment gets filtered through that belief. If Shai played great, supporters called it proof. If he struggled, critics called it exposure. That is a brutal place for any athlete to stand, and it set the stage for the biggest question of all. Was this really about Shai, or was he just the face of a much larger NBA problem? The league had to answer for itself. Eventually, the conversation became too loud for the NBA to ignore, because this was no longer just a debate about one superstar. It had become a debate about the product itself. Fans were asking why so many games felt controlled by whistles. Former players were asking whether young athletes were being trained to hunt fouls instead of finish plays. Coaches were frustrated because defensive discipline no longer felt like enough. And viewers at home were wondering why some of the biggest playoff possessions ended, not with a shot, but with a referee's decision. That is the nightmare for any sports league. You never want fans questioning whether the action is organic. You never want people feeling like the game has become too easy to manipulate. The NBA has always evolved. Rules change, styles change, spacing changes, offense changes, but there is a difference between evolution and imbalance. And many fans believe the balance had shifted too far toward offensive players. Defenders were trapped. If they played physical, they risked foul trouble. If they gave space, stars scored easily. If they stayed vertical, offensive players still found ways to create contact. That is why Shai became such a complicated figure. He was not breaking the rules. He was using the rules. And that is exactly what made the argument so intense. Because if a player is rewarded for a certain behavior, can you really blame him for repeating it? Or should the league blame itself for creating the environment? That is the uncomfortable truth. Shai may be the face of the controversy, but he did not create modern NBA officiating by himself. He is a brilliant player adapting to the system in front of him. The real question is whether that system is giving fans the best version of basketball. Because fans do not want every drive to become a legal case. They want competition. They want shot making. They want defense to matter. They want stars to earn respect in moments where nothing is easy. And if the league cannot find that balance, more players will copy the same blueprint. More fans will grow frustrated. And more superstars will have their greatness questioned not because they cannot play, but because people no longer trust the way their points are created. Shai's real challenge starts now. Here is the part that gets lost in all the noise. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is still an incredible basketball player. That matters. Because criticism can get so loud that people start acting like he has no real skill, and that is simply not true. His handle is elite. His pace is elite. His mid-range game is elite. His ability to control a possession without rushing is something young guards should study. That is what makes this controversy so fascinating. If Shai were average, nobody would care this much. The reason people argue so aggressively is because he is good enough to be great. But greatness in the NBA is not just about numbers. It is about trust. Can fans trust your game when the whistle disappears? Can teammates trust you in a hostile building? Can coaches trust your scoring package when defenses take away your favorite option? Can history trust your legacy when people look back years from now? That is the challenge ahead of Shai. Not proving he can score, he has already done that. Not proving he can win regular season games, he has already done that too. The next step is proving that his game can rise above the controversy. He needs the kind of playoff stretch where nobody talks about the officials. The kind of fourth quarter where the jumper is falling, the footwork is sharp, the defense is helpless, and the conversation becomes simple again. That is what all-time players do. They remove doubt. Jordan did it. Kobe did it. LeBron did it. Steph did it. Jokic did it. Every great player eventually reaches a point where the criticism is loud, the pressure is heavy, and the only answer that matters is performance. That moment is coming for Shai. Maybe it is one game. Maybe it is one series. Maybe it is one championship run. But at some point, he will have to take the conversation out of the referee's hands and put it completely into his own. That does not mean he should stop drawing foul. Smart basketball is still smart basketball. But if he wants the respect that comes with legendary status, the defining moments cannot be remembered as whistle moments. They have to be basketball moments, and that is where his legacy will truly be decided. The lesson the NBA cannot ignore. At the end of all this, the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander controversy is bigger than one player, one whistle, or one playoff run. It is a warning sign for the entire NBA. Because the league has reached a point where talent is everywhere. Players are more skilled than ever, guards have deeper bags, big men can shoot. Defenses have to cover more space than any generation before them. But with all that skill, Fans still want something simple. They want the game to feel real. They want contact to be judged fairly. They want stars to win with courage, creativity, and shot making, not just by searching for the fastest path to the free throw line. That is why Michael Jordan's shadow matters so much in this story. Jordan represents an era where greatness felt undeniable because it was tested through resistance. He did not just win because the game favored him, he won because he bent the game through force of will. That is the standard fans are still chasing. But this does not mean Shai should be erased, mocked, or disrespected as a person. That would miss the point. The better lesson is this. Criticism is part of greatness. Every superstar gets tested. Every superstar gets doubted. Every superstar eventually has to decide whether the noise will break them or sharpen them. Shai has the talent to answer this the right way. Not through lawsuits, not through social media, not through arguing with fans. Through basketball, through stronger playoff performances, through cleaner late-game execution, through moments so powerful that nobody remembers the whistle. And the NBA has a responsibility too. The league must protect offensive creativity, but it also has to protect the soul of competition. Defense has to matter. Physicality has to exist. Fans need to believe that the best players are winning because they are better, not because they are better at selling contact. That balance is everything. Because basketball is at its best when skill, toughness, intelligence, and fairness all meet in the same arena. So maybe this whole controversy can become something useful. Maybe Shai grows from it. Maybe the league learns from it. Maybe fans remember that debate is part of sports, but respect still matters. And maybe the next chapter of NBA greatness will not be about old school versus new school. Maybe it will be about combining both. The creativity of today, the toughness of yesterday, and the accountability every true superstar must face. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Shai is being unfairly criticized? Or do you think the NBA needs to fix the way fouls are called? Comment 1 if you believe Shai is simply using elite skill. Comment 2 if you believe foul baiting is hurting the game. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with another NBA fan who needs to hear the truth.